play readings, conversation projects, discussion groups, and this is our first venture into children's books. What we try to do is educate and make people aware and make the community more inclusive, more welcoming, and get us to take a look at what's going on around us in our own little community. If you have interest, we've got 3 or 4 people from Westland Alliance. If you'll raise your hands, ladies. If you have questions after it's over, you can talk to them. There's also some interest things in the back. There's bookmarks and there's some information about us and what we've done. But we really appreciate our library. Westland Library has partnered with us from the very beginning and has really given us a space to do these kinds of things. We also really appreciate Waka Brown to come and do this for us. So enjoy.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. Thank you for joining me on this Sunday afternoon. I'm so pleased to see all of you here. As Amy mentioned, I write children's books. The very unfortunate wish of Melony Yoshimura is my 3rd one, but my first one that's set in Oregon. And so I had a lot of fun writing it. And it is a contemporary retelling of this story, which is the actual book that my dad would read to me when my mom was preparing dinner, and his job was to read to the kids and to keep them occupied. And so this, in Japanese, it's Uriko hime to Amanjaku, and Uriko literally means like melon child or gourd child, but melon fit better for the U.S. retelling of this tale. And Amanjaku is this creature back here, and it's a little bit like a demon spirit. And the original tale is about an older couple who prays for a child. They don't have a child, and so they pray for a child, and the gods send them one inside. It's a gourd, I think, a gourd, a melon, and when they take this home, they cut it open, and there is their baby. And since this baby was so hard to come by, they're really quite overprotective of her. They never let her go out, and they say, don't open the door for anyone. But one time they did have to go into town without her, and that's when the Amanjaku appears, and she opens the door. And in the original tale, all they do is just kind of have a good time, trash the house, climb the persimmon tree, eat the persimmons, and then the Amanjaku leaves her stranded up there, and it goes and trashes the house some more, which is when the parents come back and find the Amanjaku there and not their daughter, but a raven says where Uriko is. They rescue her, and then she just weaves this tale into a tapestry. And so that was the original tale. But for the contemporary retelling, the idea kind of came about again during the pandemic, because when I was a little girl, I loved this tale because I loved the idea of my parents going away for an afternoon and someone coming to play and having a grand old time. That's why I liked the tale as a kid. But the idea and this tale kind of came back to me during the pandemic, because this time I was more of the parental mindset, and my kids wanted to go out, and my kids wanted to go play. And none of us knew like how bad COVID was, how bad it could hurt people or not hurt people. It was just very unclear as to what this effect would be. It's so new. And so I thought, well, what if this is happening now in a contemporary way, and the Amanjaku appears? And of course, the Amanjaku in a middle grade retelling is much more sinister. And the unfortunate wish of Melony Yoshimura, she wishes for freedom, and the wind whispers, at what cost? And she says, any. And so that's why it's an unfortunate wish, because she gets what she wants, and it kind of wreaks havoc on the community. But I thought I would read a short excerpt from it. It's a bit condensed because there's some details in it that aren't pertinent to the reading per se. And this is the time in the story when the parents have gone off to a quilting show, because I felt that was much more contemporary and much more Oregonian. And they've left Melony at home because she's faked being sick, so she wouldn't have to go. And so this is what she does when her parents are away. I turned on the TV and lounged on the sofa while I ate. I bit into my microwave hot dog and immediately opened my mouth again. I breathed as I tried to cool it down. All the stuff I had added to it dripped out of the bun and onto my pajama top. Did I care? Nope. I gulped down my first bite. As I searched for the stupidest, most ridiculous show to watch, the kind my parents told me would melt your brain, I heard a tap, tap, tapping on the window. I tried to ignore it, but the sound grew louder, from a tapping to an almost knock, knock, knocking. I stood up and peeked out the window. Is someone there? The knocking faded back into a tapping. No one answered. The rain had stopped, at least for now, and the water drip-dropped from the gutters like tears. Maybe that's what I'd heard. Plink. I sat back down and grabbed the remote. This time there was no doubt there was someone at the door. I jumped up. Who's there? I yelled. Who? I ran to the door and peeked out. I half expected to see Bob the barred owl, but there wasn't anything there. This time it sounded like someone was at the back door. I ran to check. Who is it? I called out. No answer until, Who is it? The question was repeated back to me, in my own voice. I took a step back. Was it an echo? But it's not like that had ever happened before at my house. My whole body tensed. Who's ready for some more slime? An announcer called out from the TV, then cheers from the audience. I relaxed. That's what it was. Maybe the TV was messing with my brain just like my parents said it would. As I headed back to the living room to turn it off, a ka-thunk directed my attention back to the front porch. Oh, Mom's package she told me to look out for. I peeked out the door and there it was, a large square brown box like any other package on any other day. Only it didn't have a return address and, in handwritten letters that looked like chicken scratch, it was addressed to Uriko. That was weird. No one called me by my Japanese name Uriko except my parents, but they weren't ones for random surprises like this. On its side was a white sticker with the word fragile on it, which only made me more suspicious and more curious at the same time. But Mom did tell me to bring the package in, so I opened the door and looked around. There was no delivery truck in sight, which was double weird because it had just been dropped off. I grabbed the box and carried it inside. It was heavy, almost like it was filled with books, or sand, or something hefty and weighty like that. But it said fragile, and those weren't fragile things. Should I open it? Part of me wondered if I should wait until my parents came back. My mom had told me to look out for the package, but she didn't say I could open it. She didn't say I couldn't open it either. Before I could change my mind, I grabbed a pair of scissors and sliced at the tape holding the box closed. Whoosh! A gust of wind seemed to rise up from the slit in the box and blow past my face. That's strange. I opened the flaps to reveal nothing. Absolutely nothing at all. I took the box and shook it upside down. Still nothing. I set it back on the table. Uri, a raspy voice called out softly from behind me. Uriko. I tensed up and looked around, but when I did, a fuzzy gray creature, kind of like a person in a wolf suit, but not quite, sort of like a Muppet, but not as cheerful or brightly colored, was standing in my kitchen. That's the next scene. let you know some of the things from West Lynn that made it into the book. I live near the Burgerville and Robinwood Park, and Robinwood Park often has owls in it. And our backyard backs up to some green space, and when my youngest son, he's now very tall, but when he was little, he was a cute little, baby-faced kid, and an owl would come to our backyard and just kind of sit on the post and always be looking at him. And of course, the older two brothers were like, oh, he wants to eat Leo, and which wasn't very nice. But as Leo grew, the owls seemed to fly away. So the owls are always around, and I don't know what time of year they're most prevalent, but if you do walk in Robinwood Park around dusk, you will see them, and sometimes 3 or 4, and they do stare at you. They do stare at you, and they do that strange little owl head bobble. And I thought they were barred owls, because I know there are a lot of barred owls around this area. And their call sounds apparently a lot like, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you? And that wasn't an original draft of this book, but my editor from New York was like, I don't get it. And so I changed it to just who. But that's for all of you guys to know that was in there. They might be screech owls though, because lately I've been hearing more of the screech it doesn't sound like the call of a barred owl. But that was part of the inspiration here. In the original tale, a raven played a prominent part. But since I wanted to make it more Oregonian, that's why I changed it to an owl. And there is a persimmon tree also in my neighborhood. If any of you live in the Robinwood neighborhood, there is this huge persimmon tree, Rose Way and Walling. If you're ever driving down there, the persimmons are starting to ripen, and once the leaves fall off is when the persimmons get very orange. And unfortunately, they're not the type of persimmons that you can pick and eat. You have to wait till they get really soft and mushy, otherwise it's very astringent. But persimmons are, I would say, more widely eaten in Japan, but so whenever I saw them, it kind of reminded me of Japan. So that's another aspect of this area that made it into this book. And does anyone know which middle school is in the book? Lily, do you have an idea? It is Rosemont, and I believe it's called Rose Creek or Cedar Ridge. So there's Rose Creek and Cedar Ridge, and like little names that I've kind of combined to put in this book. But the orange track is based off of Rosemont, and there is a character in this book who lives by the river, and that's this river down here. So I don't think any of the houses down there are gated, but in my imagination, I thought it would be nice for this character to live in this fantastically huge gated mansion type of house near the river. And so a lot of the places I imagined, like along Old River Road, and during this time of year actually was when this book, this story takes place. So yeah, I was very much immersed in this type of atmosphere when the leaves are turning red, and I kind of liked it for the spookiness and having the rain and the dreariness also be around. And yes, red, white, and blue is in there, and there are hijinks at red, white, and blue. I don't know if any of you have questions about the writing process or about the book in particular.
I enjoyed the way you told the story and integrated mocking sounds, and I forget the Japanese word in the storytelling, but we integrate sounds as part of the storytelling experience, and they occur reasonably often. you know, every minute or two, and that's, weaving that in, I think, it's a very good element, and I hope you're planning to record it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think this is being recorded for a YouTube little channel, so there is an audiobook version, and the narrator is bilingual Japanese American, which was important to me. But yeah, there are many aspects of the Japanese language which are hard to translate into English, and one of them is kind of the onomatopoeic type of sounds. And I like having those in the book as well, even if they're modified slightly to flow more smoothly with like the English telling. Thank you.
Thank you, Waka. So did you like to write stories when you were in middle school?
So it's funny because I love to read, and in my diary I found an entry that said I want to be a writer. But I pretty much wrote when I was told to. So when teachers assigned, okay, we're writing a story, and I kept those stories, they're kind of funny. And I enjoyed the process of writing a story and having it completed for class. But I didn't go out of my way to write on my own. And that didn't really happen until my 20s, I would say, when I started writing more on my own and for fun and in a more disciplined manner, I guess.
Thank you.
So the voices in your book, I'm wondering who reads it and gives you input. Like if your sons did, I know you have sons, because it has just a very authentic young voice. So is that all you, or?
So I listen to them jibber jabber all the time, and sometimes I'll say something, and or I'll check it with them, and they'll be like, no, don't say that, don't say that. I believe chillax was in here, and I thought that got edited out pretty quickly. But I guess some of the lingo changes so quickly. So if you were to put skibbity toilet in your book right now, when it actually was published, kids would read it and say, oh dear, it's kind of like my oldest son said something which a little hurtful but probably true. When the teachers and adults start doing something, it's no longer cool, so we stop. So, I think it was pertaining to the bottle flipping. Remember the bottle flipping craze was like 3 years ago? I think all the middle school teachers will remember when everyone was flipping a bottle and trying to get it to stand like either on its cap or just not fall over. And so that is no longer really a thing. And my oldest son said it was because the teachers were starting to try and do it. So, my youngest son, who is most solidly in the middle grade space, like he is definitely the one I run things past the most. And so, my fourth middle grade book, which is this is a what we call an advanced reader copy. So there's lots of typos in it, and I actually crossed some things out because there was this section that made it past the first round of copy edits that I couldn't have it in there even for an advanced reader copy. But it has a lot of baseball in it, and I watched hundreds of hours of baseball, but I never played. And so I wanted to make sure the rules were correct, and it sounded authentically baseball in this area right now. So my youngest son went through and pointed things out. Like he was like, you have this sentence where you say he hits a dinger, but dinger is a home run, and you treat it like it wasn't a home run. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll turn it into a triple. So it's very helpful to have him read through it. But they're not paid, so I'm not sure how accurate they are or how carefully they read through it.
Thank you.
We could have the drawing.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to hand out some more tickets right here.
Oh,
going to the story concept? Do you have an idea of where the kind of the whole story is as you're writing it, or is it kind of entering into it and then kind of exploring as you go? And it might be different for different stories, but just curious.
Yeah, I would say my books are kind of like a progression, because my first book is it's the nonfiction retelling of the 5 months I spent in Japan when I was 12 years old. But it's told in like that 12-year-old voice. And so that was my first one. And the second one is historical fiction, because I don't know how many of you write historical fiction, but my editor told me for children's literature, if it happens before 2010, it's historical. So that was hard. But the flip side of my experience in Japan, like I was one of the only Asian Americans in Topeka, Kansas in the mid-1980s. And so even though Dream Annie Dream is historical fiction, there are a lot of events that were kind of inspired by things that happened when I was living there. So those two kind of went together. And then, with the pandemic and kind of that feeling of wanting freedom, seeing the kids want freedom, and I had this on my desk. I started kind of thinking about a retelling, because as you know, a lot of retellings are very popular right now in children's literature. I didn't see too many Japanese folktale retellings though, and so that's why this one happened. And this fourth one also has a Japanese folktale woven in through it. But I don't have any other ideas like I'm afraid right now. Like there's kind of a YA, young adult idea bouncing around, maybe an adult thriller, but I don't know yet. And so my process, I would say, is slower than some writers. Like the ideas don't come very quickly, and I'll have an idea and I'll sit with it for half a year sometimes, and if it's still with me, I might start to explore it. But the book writing process can be pretty intense, and then there are many rereads and copy edits and drafts, so you have to make sure you really, really like the idea, because by the end you might never want to see it again. So I guess that's my process. I'm kind of a slow starter, but with publishing came deadlines, and the deadlines felt somewhat unrealistic initially, because my first book, I started it in 2016 and it finally published in 2021. And my second book, which was part of a 2-book contract, in June, I threw some ideas around, and she of course chose the least formed one, which was Dream Annie Dream. And then I said, okay, when do you want a first draft? And she said, how's October? And I was like, wow, that's 4 months for 55,000 words. Like, I was thinking, that's a little unreasonable, but but I actually just took 55,000 words, I divided it into the number of days I had, and it was okay. It was like 2 to 4 pages a day. And sometimes I tried to write a little more so I could take a day off, but it was like a pretty constant writing during that summer into October. But one thing I found about writing that quickly is it kind of helped with the continuity of the story. I didn't have to stop and reread and figure out where I was. Like I kind of knew, and I kept on going. But it takes a lot of energy. I don't prefer that type of writing.
So it sounds like you started writing commercially or whatever after you had children, right?
Yes.
What did you do before that?
So I actually, the writing that I did beforehand was all screenplays,
Oh.
because I really, really loved movies, and I took a screenwriting class, and screenwriting actually is quite fun. And they have some guidelines that make things easier. Like a script should be 100 pages. You should have a lot of white space. You should keep the descriptions pretty minimal because if a director wants to use the screenplay, you want to allow room for their creative vision. And screenplays, though, aren't much fun to read, and very few movies in comparison to books are ever made. Because if you think about the number of books published in a year versus the number of movies that come out into the theater, movies are just a fraction. So I got tired of writing screenplays and having no one read them. And so that's why I switched to book writing.
So your major in college was
My major in college was international relations.
Oh.
It didn't have anything to do. And this is for the young people too. When you go to college, I was pretty focused. I think I knew I was going to be an international relations major. And so I got all my distribution requirements done as quickly as possible. I got all my major classes completed as quickly as possible, and then I reserved most of my senior year for fun classes. And I took a drawing class, a creative writing class, and an ancient Greek art class, and I loved those classes more than I loved anything in my major. And it was my senior year though, and I'd already completed all my requirements for a major. So for the young people, don't necessarily go in thinking you're going to major in one thing. Keep an open mind, because you might find something completely different from what you expected. So, yes.
So you address a lot of issues of interest that middle school students have to face. And I was wondering from your readers if there's any in particular they seem to respond to.
I feel like the very important wish of Melony Yoshimura, I wrote that very much for kids because I very much understood and saw how much the pandemic years affected them not being able to see their friends, or when they did, it had to be outside, and this wish for freedom. I saw it with my kids, and so I felt like I was able to write toward it in this book quite a lot. I think what's interesting about while I was away is a lot of my readership are actually people my age with similar experiences, and they've written, I wish I had this book when I was 12, and I'm happy that they have this book now. And I guess for middle grade too, I feel like middle grade is actually for everyone. I think there are a lot of really good stories in middle grade. I know the ones that I remember, but there are a lot that have come out since then. And I did a lot of middle grade reading before I published because that wasn't the genre I was used to writing in. I was used to writing screenplays, so I was playing catch up with middle grade reading. And I was like, these books are excellent. Where have they been? They just weren't on my radar screen because as an adult, I didn't think they were for me. So there's actually a lot of really great